You're listening to the Eyes on Washington podcast, Holland and Knight's overarching public policy and regulation podcast series. Our public policy and regulation group has an ideal combination of lawyers and lobbyists with a comprehensive understanding of the federal policy and regulatory process. This series will shine a light on the shifting dynamics of governmental entities and the ensuing changes in economic or political policies, laws, and regulations that can have a critical impact on the health and future of your business.
Hi, my name is Teresa Hebert, and I am the Senior Communications Manager at Quorum, a public affairs software company based here in Washington, D.C. So Rich, I'm excited to dive in on the topic of earmarks. To just dive right in, can you give a 30,000-foot overview of what earmarks are as they have existed in the past and kind of what's going on right now?
Well, first of all, we're recreating these as community projects. So it's always good to have a nice euphemism. And the term earmark had become sort of so loaded in the 2008, 2009, 2010 timeframe that we had to actually come up with a different name. So that's where we start. Earmarks really are the ability of a member of Congress or a senator to include a specific dollar amount for a specific project in his district or her district or state, directed to a particular entity. So for instance, the easiest sort of way to think about it is, I want to build a new interchange in a community I represent because it's important for economic development. I'm going to earmark $12 million to help my local government do that project and get it done. And the debate around earmarks tends to center on a couple of things. Should members of Congress have this power? Or should we be leaving those types of decisions to the executive branch, to career staff at, for instance, in that instance, the Department of Transportation? And members of Congress feel very strongly that the Constitution gives them the power of the purse. And that includes not only appropriating general funding to accounts, but also taking care of issues in their district back home. So that question seems pretty cut and dry at this point. And then the second question, which really put us into the situation in 2010 where earmarks were at that point temporarily ended, is how do you deal with some of the ethical issues around earmarks? For instance, a member of Congress who appropriates funding to an entity that he has a financial interest in or may benefit from. Or in my off-ramp example, a member of Congress who owns a piece of real estate 2 blocks from the off-ramp, and the off-ramp is going to increase the value of his property or her property. So you'll see in the requirements from the House Appropriations Committee that have come out now that very clearly there will be ethical disclosure on any personal interest a congressman has or a congresswoman has in a project. And we will kind of move forward from there. And any project that shouldn't be funded, that people have questions about, they'll have the ability to raise that on the House and Senate floor and have the committee leadership address that as the bill moves forward.
Who are the key players that folks should be following as this develops as a new process this year in Congress?
Well, it's interesting. There's very broad support, frankly, interestingly, in a time when we're so partisan about things, on both sides of the aisle to bring earmarks back. The House Republican caucus will be moving towards a vote on the issue over the next couple of weeks. That's expected to pass, and Republicans will be allowed to seek earmarks if they so desire. Obviously, you've got a history here where Steny Hoyer, the majority leader in the House, Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker, Mitch McConnell, the minority leader in the Senate now, all are former appropriators, all in their heart of hearts support this. I would say Congressman Hoyer is sort of at the tip of the spear of bringing earmarks back. He strongly believes this is important. And I think, over the last 2 administrations without earmarks, having handed over so much power to the executive branch, the leaders of the Appropriations Committee, and particularly Senator Shelby, Senator Leahy in the Senate, who have both of them been here for for decades now, feel very strongly that Congress needs to reassert its power of the purse.
And has President Biden weighed in on this at all? I know back last time around, President Obama had a hand in ending the process of earmarks at that time, but has President Biden weighed in on this time around?
It's interesting. President Obama, even when he was in the Senate, was not an earmark supporter, really. President Biden's a different situation. He when he was in the Senate, definitely pursued earmarks for the state of Delaware. You can make an argument for a smaller state like that it's very important that their senators and congressmen, in this case congresswomen, have the ability to advocate for major infrastructure projects and research and development projects in that state. Otherwise, they're not naturally going to get their share, if you will. So I don't think that President Biden has opined one way or another. I think his general approach on a lot of these types of issues is to leave it to the House and the Senate in terms of how to proceed. But I think he's comfortable with the practice based on his history.
Are these in practice now in that folks can start asking for support from community projects, or is there a vote or a bill that needs to pass for them to come back to the process? And given that we have a Democratic controlled House and Senate, is there a world where Democrats are participating in this process and Republicans are not?
Good question. So there's no absolute rules change required. In other words, no vote of the entire House or the entire Senate to change the rules. The Republican caucus in the House and Republicans in the Senate have been meeting and discussing these issues. House Republicans are clearly, moving towards a vote, and it's pretty clear they're going to allow their members to request earmarks because they're making it a secret vote. And that's a sign for you that they are comfortable with people voting however they want. Senate Republicans have been a little bit quieter on this. Of course, you've got a number of Senate Republicans who are very strong anti-earmark proponents. And obviously then, probably the vast majority of the Republican conference in the Senate who are much more comfortable and likely to pursue earmarks. So I think both sides, both parties will end up including earmarks and making requests of the Appropriations Committee for district or state specific projects without question. And no rules change will be required. The Appropriations Committee in the House and the Appropriations Committee in the Senate both are putting together their policies. The House committee just put out the details of its policy to request community projects yesterday and included the accounts in which members can request projects. So the picture is becoming much clearer. We're still waiting on guidance from the Senate, and I'm sure that will be coming in the next week or so. And then members will need to get going on figuring out what they want to request for their districts and their states.
And so transitioning a little bit to folks in the public affairs industry who want to participate in this process, what industries and types of organizations stand to be most involved in this process, especially since there have been some rule changes about who can participate in order to make it new and improved from the last time around?
So as we were talking up front, we have sort of the House process and rules out there right now. We're awaiting more guidance from the Senate. So I'm speaking at a point where we've only got sort of House rules to go by. But in the House, you will not be, as a private sector entity, be able to request an earmark. It is only open to nonprofit organizations and state, local, regional governmental entities. And in part, that's to address the ethics issue I spoke to before of a member of Congress owning stock in a company or an entity in which he addresses that that issue from an ethics perspective. In terms of other rules to just be aware of, you've got to be able to comply with. This doesn't work around other federal requirements that would otherwise apply to this type of grant funding. So for instance, if you're going to ask for my off-ramp in that example again, you still are going to be subject to the National Environmental Policy Act review that transportation projects require. You're going to have to pay the prevailing wage under federal labor standards, all those types of things. So you need to make sure when you get an earmark for something that you understand all the requirements of getting that funding and can abide by them. And particularly for a smaller nonprofit, obviously a state or a local government will be able to handle that. But for a smaller nonprofit or somebody who is not as intimate with the requirements that you must comply with when you get federal funding, that's something that we're very careful to walk them through. And that is why there are legal compliance and legal overlays to the earmarking process, and why oftentimes folks come to law firms for support in this area.
So for an organization who fits those criteria, what would you recommend that they do right now to get the ball rolling on engaging legislators that they might want to help earmark funding for them?
So it's very important to, identify a project, sort of understand what accounts you can get funding from in the House right now, identify a project that fits within those accounts. Just to be honest, if you are a lay person who hasn't worked in the federal funding programs with a significant amount of time, this is something that getting assistance actually does help on. We have a lot of expertise in this arena and can walk people through, know that project won't fit because of this, but you might want to think about this other project that would be a perfect candidate, and we can help people prioritize that way. At that point, you need to reach out to your congressional delegation, both your House members and your senators. They will have requirements for what you need to submit to their office. And to make life more complex, every office has sort of different requirements in terms of a form that you need to submit to them. So you may end up, if you have a delegation with 2 members of Congress and 2 senators, doing 4 slightly different forms on one project. And that makes your life more complex. But imagine us who do this for a living, we're doing literally thousands of forms, right? So it can be very complex. Earmarks are very competitive. It's not a matter of you just, giving your stuff to your member of Congress and the funding is going to come through. It's not a money store by any means. So member of Congress, an average member of Congress is going to get 2 or 3 project in spending bills on an annual basis. And he or she may have 30, 40, 50 people coming to him asking for support. So by no means is this an easy thing. And you just need to be aware of that. You certainly don't want to be in a situation of relying on it coming through the back end in a life or death situation. This is a little bit more like the casino than it is the bank.
We talk a lot about what organizations should bring to a meeting with a member of Congress when they want them to vote or sponsor a certain way on a bill. Which of those things carry over to this process from a persuasion, more person-to-person circumstance, as opposed to the more formal legal processes?
Sure. I mean, you certainly want to know your member of Congress, understand what makes him or her tick, and understand what will be attractive to them from a project perspective. So if you're working on my off-ramp example and you're working with a member of Congress who is very concerned about climate change and wants to make sure he's using his appropriations requests to combat it, the fact that a renewable energy plant may be siting near that off-ramp and that this will make their costs cheaper in terms of transportation may be a good way to make that case. If you are, working with a conservative Republican member in the same situation who doesn't believe in climate change and doesn't care about renewable energy, that's not your case to make. You may just want to make clear that this is going to clear up congestion at the nearest intersection, and his constituents or her constituents are going to be much happier as a result. So you do need to message these projects in a way that convince the member of Congress, this is something I support. Wow, this is right up my alley. And that's, kind of a big part of getting a project over the line at the end of the day.
And there's been a lot of conversation about earmarks bringing back some bipartisanship to the chamber because more folks will have a personal stake in legislation. Do you foresee this bringing any changes to the dynamics for other legislation that's not specifically funding legislation, but because there are new circumstances where legislators are working together, that it might change the way that other legislation is moving?
I think that's the hope. On the one hand, you have to ask why things are so partisan today. I like to let our members of Congress and senators off the hook a little bit here. I think they are actually less partisan than many places in the country right now. All they're doing is reflecting our society today. And, the flaring of populism over the last decade and the enhanced partisanship go hand in hand. Historically, this happens in America every couple of generations. We've seen it back, certainly to before World War II and late 60s. So this type of partisanship in the country is not, surprising in that sense. And I think members of Congress do their best on a daily basis to work around that, but their constituents are their constituents, and they're reflecting the people they represent. And that's what they are voted into office to go do. Will earmarks help? I think around the edges, any mechanism in place that will help members of Congress work together in a collaborative fashion, whether it's on a local project that they otherwise wouldn't have been involved in together, or a specific piece of policy that they're trying to get done. Anything like that is going to be helpful. Is it going to, change Congress as we know it today? No. But I think one of the reasons why Congressman Hoyer and a lot of the appropriations members are so supportive of bringing earmarks back here is because right now we need, particularly after January 6th, we need every little step in the right direction we can get. And this is certainly that.
And obviously this conversation is moving pretty quickly right now as each of the caucuses works to set their rules. What is the timeline where folks should be involved and engaged in this process? If someone wants an earmarked funding for a project, should they be going out tomorrow and getting started? What does that look like?
Yesterday. Don't wait. Whoever you work with in Washington to help you get your project done, every day you wait from here through, the spring, lessens your chances of success. Generally, we advise clients in the earmarking process to start in January and get ready. Obviously, we couldn't do that this year because the reality of the situation is this decision was only made in February. But we did actually tell clients in January, start thinking about it. And we did start working with clients in January. So if you're hearing my mellifluous voice right now, and you're just thinking about this and thinking about getting started, I hate to sound like your mother or your father, but do it now, don't wait.
That sounds like good advice. How do you think that COVID has played a role in this coming back? Obviously, infrastructure is a big potential economic boost. Do you think that if we weren't in these circumstances that this conversation would be different?
No, I think COVID has definitely played a role, probably psychologically or subconsciously for a lot of members who are seeing the direct impacts on their district of the virus and wanting to channel help to their districts. And one of the things they can do is request specific projects. So one of the accounts, for instance, you request an earmark in here, are the Labor, Health, and Human Services accounts for that support health facility construction. So a community that did not have sufficient health clinic capability before the virus, a member can solve that problem in the appropriations process this year and save lives going forward. So I think the virus made us all acutely aware of the vulnerabilities in our community and certainly made every member of Congress aware of that. And what community projects allow a member to do is to look forward this year and figure out what problems can I actually solve right now with this process. And members who oppose these projects are missing that point. This is an opportunity for you to make a big difference in a way that sometimes a single piece of legislation can't.
I think those are all the questions that I have. Are there any other details or pieces of advice that you think are really important for folks to know about earmarks?
No, I would just make the point that, if you are out there in, local government or state government or in a nonprofit and have the feeling from time to time that the federal government seems so far away and non-responsive, this is the one channel that allows you to solve a problem you're having by working with your elected representatives. In some sense, it is a direct channel of democracy from the local level to Washington, and hopefully breaks down, some of the preconceptions about the federal government not being responsive. So I really counsel people, if you've got a community changing project that will really make a difference in your local community, this is a process that you need to look at and talk to your member of Congress about, talk to your senator about. And if you need help, talk to somebody like us.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Eyes on Washington podcast, brought to you by Holland and Knight's Public Policy and Regulation Group. For more information on our Public Policy and Regulation Group, please visit hklaw.com/ppr.